A group of friends on vacation decided to make their water sports more thrilling. They rode 2 jet skis at high speed toward each other, then made a sharp turn at the last second, pulling off an extreme maneuver. The boys were enjoying themselves, but the 2 girls were terrified, screaming and pleading for them to return to shore, because any mistake could be fatal. But despite their desperate pleas, the drivers, Tyler and Greg, ignored them. They soon pulled apart and began the second round of their water race. An accident happened, and the intense collision sent them both flying into the water. Greg's lower leg was mangled, the broken bone clearly visible, while Tyler lost consciousness and nearly sank to the bottom of the ocean. Fortunately, Tom spotted him just in time and pulled him back to the surface. They helped each other climb back onto the jet skis. After quickly tending to Greg's injury, Tom tried to call for help, but they had already gone beyond the signal range. With one of the jet skis destroyed, the remaining one couldn't support all 5 of them, so Millie and Tyler had to stay in the water, hoping a passing fishing boat might spot them. Time passed, and the calm sea offered no signs of rescue. Greg's injury was getting worse, and Nat decided to leave Tyler and Millie behind to take Greg to the hospital. However, when Tom tried to start the jet ski, he found it wouldn't start. It was clear that the collision had caused some damage. They had no choice but to move Greg and try to figure out what was wrong. In the process, Greg's injury worsened when he fell and hit his wound.
It's okay, dude.
When Tom opened the seat compartment, he found there were no tools to fix the problem. Seeing Greg in agony, they had no choice but to lift him up again. After all the commotion, Greg was barely conscious. With no other options, they could only stay where they were, waiting for help. Nat tried to use her phone to reflect sunlight, hoping someone would notice them. Millie told her it was pointless, as it was only 7 a.m., and no one would be out at sea. To make things worse, they were drifting farther from the shore, and if they didn't find a way back soon, they would be facing death. Nat checked her phone again, hoping for a signal, but instead, she found intimate photos of Tom and her best friend, Millie. When she saw her secret exposed, Tom rushed to grab the phone back, but Nat refused to let go. As a result, during their struggle over the phone, an accident happened, and the phone fell into the sea. Millie then apologized to Nat, explaining that it was a mistake they made while drunk, but Nat couldn't bring herself to believe that. As the atmosphere grew incredibly awkward, Tyler suddenly remembered that they had seen a sailing boat when they first went out to sea. He decided to swim there alone to seek help. The others immediately protested, fearing for his safety, but Tyler didn't want to just sit and wait to die. As a skilled swimmer back at school, he was confident he could make it. After hearing this, they stopped trying to stop him and could only pray that Tyler would succeed in finding help. However, as far as the eye could see, there was nothing but the vast ocean. Finding that boat would not be easy, especially in the perilous deep sea. Sure enough, Tyler hadn't swum very far before Millie saw something terrifying. Tyler was still swimming forward with all his might, and with the sound of crashing waves, he couldn't hear his friend's warnings. The next second, the shark disappeared from the surface. Just when they thought Tyler was doomed, they were horrified to see the shark reappear beside them. In their panic, they fell into the water, and the worst part was that Millie couldn't swim, and the terrifying shark was right below her feet. In the nick of time, Tom rushed to the rescue, and they quickly swam toward the jet skis. Fortunately, the shark didn't attack them, but just as Tom safely got Millie onto the jet ski, Nat and Greg were in danger again. He dove back into the water to save them. However, before Tom could get close, the shark suddenly attacked Greg. The smell of blood from his wound made him the shark's target, and Tom quickly swam back to the jet ski in fear, but Nat was dragged under as well, her hair tangled in Greg's watch. Nat and Greg were instantly dragged into the deep sea, and as they were about to be pulled to the ocean floor, Nat desperately tugged at her hair. In a critical moment, the watch finally came off. With the last bit of awareness left, Nat surfaced just before suffocating, while Greg became the shark's meal. When they saw Nat was still alive, Tom and Millie were overjoyed. Nat swam toward the jet ski, and with Tom's help, she narrowly escaped disaster. Meanwhile, Tyler, still searching for help, finally saw hope. The sailing boat was not far away. He excitedly shouted for help, but the people on the boat couldn't hear him. As Tyler continued swimming, a giant shark's dorsal fin suddenly flashed before his eyes. Terrified, Tyler quickly dove into the water to assess the situation, but the shark vanished without a trace. The sailboat was so close, yet Tyler's life was ticking away. In an instant, The great white shark's sharp teeth ripped through Tyler's abdomen, and the intense pain caused him to let out a desperate scream. Instinctively, he shouted for help while frantically swimming forward. Finally, the people on the boat noticed the commotion, but by then, Tyler had already become the shark's prey. The remaining 3 people, seeing that Tyler had not returned, realized that he had probably had an accident. Millie couldn't hold it together anymore and broke down, convinced that they were all going to die there. Annoyed, Tom snapped at her to shut up. Desperation began to settle in. It was already 3 p.m., and the scorching sun was overhead. The intense exposure and severe dehydration made their situation even worse. Millie tried to drink seawater to quench her thirst but was stopped by Nat, who explained that seawater would only worsen their dehydration. Tom tried again to fix the jet ski, but once again, it was in vain. They had finally made it to the evening. The temperature dropped sharply, and they were shivering in the cold. The vast, dark sea filled them with fear, and the occasional splash of fish jumping out of the water only added to their anxiety. Could it be that the sharks came out to hunt at night too? Just then, Nat noticed a faint light emerging from the darkness. They immediately shouted excitedly, but there was no response. As the light seemed to move farther away, Nat suggested Tom swim over to ask for help. As the only man among them, Tom didn't argue but steeled himself to dive into the freezing cold water, fearing that there might be sharks beneath the water. He moved cautiously with every stroke. Suddenly, a noise from the water startled him, and he quickly retreated. Nat couldn't believe that the man she liked could be so useless in such a moment. Left with no choice, she decided to go herself. Fortunately, nothing unusual happened during her swim. However, when Nat finally reached the light, she was horrified to discover that the person floating there had no signs of life. It looked like he had also been attacked by sharks. In a panic, Nat hurried back, and with Tom's help, she returned to the jet ski. Their hopes of rescue were shattered once again, and they were now completely despondent. Soon, the sun began to rise above the ocean. It was then that they noticed the body had drifted closer, along with several wooden planks. They quickly pulled the planks in, planning to use them as paddles, and stripped the life vest off the man's body, putting it on Millie, who couldn't swim. Then, they paddled desperately toward the shore, but due to severe dehydration and days without food, they quickly exhausted all their energy. Even more terrifying, the shark that had disappeared for a while suddenly reappeared and bit off Nat's wooden plank with a single strike. Though Tom managed to scare the shark off temporarily using the plank, the shark wasn't going to give up so easily. It leapt from the water again, biting Tom's leg. Nat hurriedly used her clothes to bandage Tom's wound. At that moment, their only hope was to fix the jet ski, but without tools, they couldn't open the engine cover. As Nat and Tom struggled to open the engine cover, the hungry shark circled nearby. Watching them closely, they dared not relax for a second, keeping their eyes on the shark to prevent a sudden attack. Then, the shark's fin disappeared beneath the surface, and Nat immediately felt a sense of dread. Unexpectedly, just then, they fell into the water instantly, and the sharks immediately attacked. The shark's vicious attack left Tom seriously injured, but with Nat's help, he narrowly survived. Unfortunately, Millie wasn't as lucky. She managed to grab onto the jet ski, but the shark took a bite out of her lower body. Nat desperately tried to save her, but Millie instantly coughed up blood, and the surrounding water turned red. As the camera shifted, Millie's lower body had already disappeared, and Nat could only cry helplessly as she let go. Looking at Tom, who was barely conscious, Nat trembled in fear. She seemed to see her own fate reflected in them, but her fierce will to survive kept her from giving up. She pried open the jet ski's seat again, using all her strength to finally snap the engine cover off. Clearly, the shark's attack had caused the cover to break. Nat managed to pull the engine cover off, and finally discovered the cause of the jet ski's malfunction. The fuel line had snapped. However, without spare parts, it seemed almost impossible to fix it. Just as she was at a loss, she noticed a life vest floating on the surface and suddenly had an idea. So, Nat placed the engine cover fragments on her body and, gathering her courage, jumped into the sea. She managed to detach the air tube from the life vest. At that moment, the shark appeared behind her, but it didn't attack. Instead, it swam straight toward the jet ski. It seemed the shark was trying to drag Tom into the water. Seeing this, Nat quickly swam toward the jet ski, but just as she neared it, the shark turned its focus on her. Tom, seeing what was happening, shouted a warning, and Nat stopped swimming immediately. As the shark approached quickly, Nat knew that facing it head-on was her only chance of survival. Without hesitation, she pulled out the broken engine cover piece she had kept on her. Tom thought Nat had already been devoured by the shark. Just as he was beginning to despair, Nat successfully climbed back onto the jet ski. Seeing that Nat was still alive, Tom let out a sigh of relief. With the air tube from the life vest, Nat was able to reconnect the broken fuel line. When the engine roared to life, they finally saw a glimmer of hope. Nat excitedly twisted the throttle and quickly headed toward the shore with Tom. But just as the coastline was within reach, the relentless shark appeared again, chasing after them. Realizing the danger, Nat immediately accelerated, but she still couldn't escape the shark's attack. The damaged jet ski slowed down even more, and at this rate, they wouldn't make it to the shore. They would become the shark's meal. At the critical moment, the cowardly Tom stepped up. He jumped into the water, ready to use himself as bait to give Nat a chance to escape. Though Tom was a jerk, Nat didn't want to leave him behind and hoped to take him with her. But Tom decisively exposed his wound, and the smell of blood quickly attracted the shark. It was only when Nat saw Tom being dragged away by the shark that she, tearfully, sped off on the jet ski. With the shoreline only a few moments away, disaster struck once again. The jet ski collided with a reef. Nat was thrown into the water. She quickly surfaced and swam desperately toward the shore. As she turned around, she saw the terrifying dorsal fin of the shark. In that moment, the shark got stuck between the rocks. Nat narrowly escaped and made it back to the shore. She collapsed on the sand, gasping for air, gripping a handful of sand to confirm she wasn't dreaming. Then, she struggled to stand up and slowly left the place that had nearly cost her life.